His driver had already pulled onto the main road when Adam remembered the acquisition file sitting on his mahogany desk. $300 million needed his signature before the sun came up. He didn't explain. He just told the driver to turn around. No one knew he was coming back. The estate gates opened silently, yielding to his authority. The garden lights glowed soft and harmless, illuminating the path he had walked 1,000 times. He stepped onto the gravel, his mind already on the contract, and then a hand slammed over his mouth. It hit him hard. "Don't move." It was Sophie. The old gardener dragged him with surprising strength behind a wall of tall fox gloves. Her grip was iron, her palms smelling of damp earth and rosemary. "Don't breathe," she whispered into his ear. "Just listen." Through the cracked study window, a voice floated into the night air. It was Anita. She sounded calm, steady, almost bored. "Yes," Anita said into the phone. "I increased the dosage." There was a pause. Adam felt the cold air settle into his lungs. "No, not enough to kill him immediately," she continued. "That would raise questions. The doctor already documented liver deterioration. By next week, they'll call it natural progression." Adam's eyes didn't blink. He stared at the shadows of the flowers, his body turning to stone. Inside the room, glass clinked against glass. "He thinks I'm scared of losing him." Anita laughed softly. It wasn't the laugh of a villain. It was the laugh of a woman who had already moved on. "I replaced the green juice supplement 2 months ago. Slow toxins, undetectable in small increments. By the time he realizes what's happening, he won't even be able to speak." Sophie slowly removed her hand from Adam's mouth. He didn't move. He didn't reach for the weapon tucked into his waistband. He just watched. Inside the house, a man stepped into view beside his wife. It wasn't a stranger or a business rival. It was someone Adam had trusted with his life. The man leaned down, his hands possessive as he kissed Anita's neck. "How much longer?" the man asked. Anita's voice dropped to a low, intimate whisper. 3 weeks. Adam's jaw tightened. He had survived street wars. He had crushed empires, but he had never stood outside his own home, listening to his death being scheduled like a routine meeting. Behind him, Sophie breathed a jagged truth. "They've been doing this for months, Adam." Inside, Anita raised a glass to the empty room. "To freedom," she said. In the silence of the garden, the man they called the ghost of soul finally understood. He wasn't just being betrayed. He was being erased. One man's home just became his graveyard. If you're ready to see how the ghost fights back, hit like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Also, tell us in the comments the city or country you're watching from. Adam didn't pull the Beretta from his waistband. He didn't storm through the glass doors to paint the study red. Instead, he stood in the freezing dark of the garden and looked at Sophie Bagshaw. His eyes were like chipped flint. "Not a word," he said. The command was low, vibrating with the authority of a man who usually ordered executions, not silence. Sophie didn't flinch. She slowly lowered her hand from his face, her breathing steadying as she looked at the man she had served for 15 years. "I've been watching her, Adam," she whispered. Her voice was thin but resolute. "She doesn't prepare the morning juice in the kitchen anymore. She takes the bottles to her private dressing room. I found the discarded vials in the terrace bin 3 weeks ago. Heart supplements," she told the maids. "But I grew up on a farm. I know what a foxglove looks like when it's distilled. I know what digitalism does to a man's pulse." Adam's jaw tightened. He looked toward the house. Inside, Anita was laughing again, a soft, melodic sound that now felt like a needle under his fingernail. "Why didn't you say anything?" Adam asked. "Who would believe the gardener?" Sophie countered. "You were already showing the signs, the tremors, the brain fog. If I spoke, she'd have me removed and then you'd be truly alone. I've been diluting the doses in the fridge when she's at her Pilates classes. I've been buying you time, Adam, but time is running out." Adam looked at his hands. They were steady for now, but he remembered the fumbled pen during yesterday's board meeting. He remembered the sudden, crushing fatigue he had attributed to stress. He wasn't dying because his body was failing. He was dying because he was being fed. "You've been protecting me," Adam said, the realization landing with more weight than the betrayal itself. I was protecting the man who keeps the gates locked, Sophie said, her loyalty stripped of sentiment. If you fall, this house becomes a tomb for everyone in it. You need to stay quiet. You need to be the man they think you are, weak, fatting, and blind. It's the only way we see the rest of the players. Adam nodded once. A silent pact was sealed between the king and the gardener. He turned back toward the gravel path, moving away from the house instead of toward it. He needed to disappear before Anita realized he had ever returned. He had survived the streets of Seoul by knowing when to strike. Now he would survive Manhattan by knowing how to die. The following afternoon, the heavy atmosphere of the estate shifted. A beat-up SUV rattled up the service drive, parking far from the gleaming sedans. Kendra Bagshaw stepped out. She didn't have her mother's quiet patience. She moved with a sharp, guarded energy, her eyes scanning the sprawling property like she was looking for a fight. Kendra had only come back to the estate to help Sophie with the heavy lifting in the conservatory. But she didn't hide her disdain for the man who signed the paychecks. To her, Adam was just another powerful man who thought the world was his to break. Adam watched her from the shadows of the second-floor balcony. He was already feeling the phantom weight of the toxins in his system. His vision blurred at the edges. He needed a lab, but he couldn't use his usual fixers. Anyone connected to his organization could be working for his brother. He waited until Sophie was busy in the potting shed and cornered Kendra near the rear stables. She didn't startle when he appeared. She just tightened her grip on a garden spade. "You look like hell, Mr. Lee," she said. No fear, no respect, just a cold observation. "I need a blood panel," Adam said, his voice a low gravel. Discreet. No names, no digital footprint. Kendra laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Why would I help you? My mother spends her life making your grass greener while you ruin lives for a living. Go to a private clinic." "I can't." Adam stepped closer, the effort making his heart hammer unevenly. "If I walk into a clinic, the people trying to kill me will know I found them. Your mother is the only reason I'm still standing, Kendra. She's the one who asked me to trust you." Kendra's expression shifted at the mention of her mother. She looked at the tremor in Adam's hand, then back to his face. She saw the hidden identity of a man who was no longer a predator, but a victim in his own castle. "I have a friend from the university, a lab tech who owes me," Kendra said, her voice dropping. "But don't think this makes us friends. I'm doing this for her, not for you." She didn't wait for a thank you. She grabbed a small medical kit from her bag and took the sample right there in the shadow of the stables. As the needle pierced his skin, Adam realized that the daughter was just as dangerous as the mother, but for an entirely different reason. She wasn't loyal to his power. She was loyal to the truth. And in this house of lies, the truth was the only weapon he had left. 3 hours later, Adam's phone buzzed. On the nightstand. It was a restricted number. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened an encrypted messaging app Kendra had forced him to download. The file was a PDF, a mess of chemical symbols and red-flagged percentages. He didn't need a medical degree to understand the summary at the bottom. Chronic digitalis toxicity. Hepatic enzyme failure imminent. The lab confirmed the toxin was consistent with the green juice Anita served him every morning. It was cold. It was surgical. It was a slow-motion execution hidden behind a smile. Adam sat on the edge of his bed, the moonlight reflecting off the dark ink on his neck. He looked at the door to the hallway, knowing Anita was likely in the next room, perhaps already picking out her dress for his funeral. He felt a surge of the old heat, the urge to walk in and end it, but he forced his breathing to slow. A quick death was too easy for her. He called Kendra. "The results are in," he said, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. "You were right. It's the juice. What's the move, boss?" Kendra's voice was tense, stripped of its earlier mockery. "Do we call the police? My friend at the lab can testify." "No," Adam replied. "The police can be bought. My brother has deep pockets. And Anita has the grieving wife act perfected. If I miss, they'll just finish the job in a hospital where I have no protection." He paused, listening to the silence of the house. "I need you to keep that drive safe. If I fall, if I don't make it through the next week, you leak everything. Not to the cops, to the board of directors, to the street. I want their names turned into poison." "You're really going to keep drinking it?" Kendra asked in a note of genuine horror in her voice. Sophie is diluting it. I'll play the part. I need them to think they're winning, Adam said. A man who thinks he's already won becomes sloppy. That's when I'll take everything back. The trust was a thin, fragile thread between them. But it was holding. Adam wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was building a cage for the people who thought they were his keepers. The transformation was gradual, then sudden. Adam began his masterpiece of deception, playing the role of a dying lion. He allowed his hands to shake during morning coffee, the porcelain cup clattering against the saucer with a sound that signaled his end. He slurred his words in the hallway, letting Anita catch him leaning against the wall for support. In the boardroom, he was a ghost of his former self. He missed key details, staring blankly at the Manhattan skyline while his younger brother led the presentations. The board members exchanged worried glances while his brother's eyes gleamed with a predatory hunger. The false victory was taking root. The villains were convinced the finish line was in sight. Sophie watched him from the garden, her heart heavy as she saw him stagger across the terrace. She knew it was a performance, but the realism chilled her. One evening as she trimmed the hedges near his bench, she leaned in close. You're playing this too well, Adam, she whispered. The CFO was in the study today. He was laughing with your brother about liquidation. They aren't waiting for you to pass anymore. They are getting impatient. Evil doesn't stay patient forever. Adam didn't look up. He kept his gaze fixed on his trembling knees. Let them be impatient, Sophie. An impatient enemy makes mistakes. They think they've already inherited the crown. They've stopped looking for the knife. Inside the house, Anita's confidence had turned into a cold, bright arrogance. She no longer hid her phone calls. She stopped pretending to be the concerned wife when the doors were closed. She stood over him as he lay on the sofa, her face a mask of beautiful, terrifying indifference. You should rest, Adam, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. The end is coming soon. Just let go. Adam closed his eyes, his breathing shallow and ragged behind his eyelids. He wasn't dying. He was counting the days. He was waiting for the moment they felt so safe that they would say too much. But as Sophie had warned, the escalation was coming and the stakes were about to turn lethal. The air in the house grew thin as Anita's patience finally evaporated. She was tired of the slow crawl toward the finish line. One afternoon, Sophie was quietly working in the kitchen, her back to the door, when she heard the distinct click of a pill bottle. Through the reflection in a stainless steel toaster, Sophie saw Anita standing by the refrigerator. She wasn't just pouring the juice. She was emptying a vial of concentrated powder into the glass. The dosage was double what it had been the week before. This wasn't a slow burn anymore. It was a sprint to the grave. Sophie turned around. Her face was pale. That's a lot of supplements for a sick man, Mrs. Lee. Anita didn't jump. She didn't look guilty. She simply set the glass down and turned to Sophie with a cold, terrifying smile. The mask of the grieving wife was gone. You've lived a long time, Sophie, Anita said, her voice like ice. Too long. You think I haven't noticed the way you linger in the hallways, the way you look at me? You're a gardener. You should have stuck to the dirt. I know what you're doing, Sophie whispered, her voice trembling. He knows too. Anita's laugh was sharp. He doesn't know what day of the week it is. And as for you, you're finished. Get your things. You're fired. If I see you on this property by sunset, I'll have security throw you into the street. Sophie was ushered out by two of Adam's own guards, men who had shifted their loyalty to the CFO and Adam's brother. Weeks ago, Adam watched from the window, his heart sinking. He saw Sophie standing at the gate, her shoulders slumped, her small bag of belongings at her feet. He was now truly alone in the house. No more diluted doses. No more silent protection. That evening, Anita brought the glass to his bedside. She sat on the edge of the mattress, stroking his hair with one hand while she held the poison with the other. Drink up, Adam, she murmured. It's almost over. Adam looked into her eyes, seeing the void where a soul should have been. He took the glass. His hands didn't shake this time. He knew that if he drank this, he might not wake up. But the performance had to continue. He tilted the glass back, the bitter taste of betrayal hitting the back of his throat. Sophie Bagshaw was not a woman who surrendered. She had spent decades coaxing life from stubborn soil, and she wasn't about to let the man she protected be choked out by weeds. That night, under a moonless sky, Sophie bypassed the security cameras she knew were blind spots. She moved through the service entrance, her breathing heavy, but her resolve unshaken. She reached the kitchen with a fresh bottle of the supplement, pure, untainted, intending to switch it one last time. She was seconds away from the cabinet when the lights flickered on. The CFO stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand. He didn't look surprised. He looked disgusted. "The gardener," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Anita said you were a pest. I told her you were a liability." "You're killing a man who trusted you," Sophie said, her voice steady even as her heart hammered. "You think the money will hide the smell of what you've done?" "Money hides everything, Sophie." He stepped toward her. Sophie didn't back down. She swung the heavy glass bottle, a desperate arc of defiance. But the CFO was younger and faster. He lunged, grabbing her wrists. The struggle was short and brutal. He shoved her back, a hard, panicked burst of strength. Sophie's heel caught on the edge of the marble island. She fell backward, the world tilting. There was a sickening thud as her head struck the sharp corner of the countertop. The silence that followed was deafening. The CFO stood over her, his chest heaving. He didn't call for an ambulance. He didn't check for a pulse. He watched for a full minute as the light faded from her eyes. He then carefully picked up the bottle she had brought, wiped his prints from the counter, and walked out, leaving her in the dark. It looked like a tragic accident. An old woman sneaking back into a place she was no longer welcome, slipping in the dark. But when the morning sun hit the kitchen floor, Adam saw the truth. He stood over Sophie's body, his face a mask of cold, vibrating rage. The conspiracy was no longer just about his life or his money. It was about the only person who had stayed when the world went dark. The hidden identity of the victim died with her. The ghost was back. And this time, he wasn't just going to survive. He was going to burn them all. The news of Sophie's accidental fall hit the estate like a physical blow. Kendra Bagshaw didn't arrive with tears. She arrived with fire. She pushed past the security guards at the gate, her face a mask of grief-stricken fury. When she saw Adam standing near the garden where her mother had worked for years, she didn't see a boss or a powerful man. She saw a catalyst for death. "You brought this into our lives," Kendra spat, her voice cracking with the weight of her loss. "She stayed here to save you. She lied to you. She died in your kitchen because you were too busy playing a game to just end it." Adam didn't defend himself. He didn't point to his trembling hands or mention the poison, still circulating in his veins. He stood in the shadow of the foxgloves, his eyes fixed on the spot where Sophie had first stopped him. "They didn't just try to kill me, Kendra," Adam said, his voice a low, hollow rasp. "They killed her. They think she's an entry in a ledger. They think she's a mess they can just mop up." He stepped closer to her, the ghost flickering behind his eyes. "You have the drive. You have the blood results, but that's not enough anymore. If we go to the police now, they'll have the best lawyers money can buy. They'll be out on bail before your mother is even buried." Kendra wiped a stray tear from her cheek, her eyes hardening into something lethal. "Then what do? We let them think they won," Adam said. "We give them the victory they've been killing for. When they think I'm gone, they'll stop hiding. They'll show their hands. And when they do, I'm going to take everything they love and turn it to ash." The alliance was no longer about survival or truth. It was a blood pact. Kendra looked at the man her mother had died to protect and finally understood the cost of his world. She didn't want his money. She wanted justice. And Adam was the only one who could deliver it. The annual charity gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar. And this year it was supposed to be Adam's wake. He arrived leaning heavily on a cane, his skin a sickly pale gray, the result of a carefully applied cosmetic film and weeks of staged malnutrition. Anita walked beside him, a vision in black lace, her hand resting on his arm with the practiced tenderness of a grieving widow. To the high society crowd, Adam was a dying king. To the CFO and Adam's brother, he was a walking corpse. Midway through the keynote speech, Adam let the false victory reach its peak. He gripped the edge of the podium, his breathing turning into a ragged wet wheeze. He looked at Anita, his eyes rolling back, and then he collapsed. The sound of his body hitting the stage was a dull, heavy thud that silenced the room. Pandemonium erupted as the paramedics, handpicked by Kendra's lab contact, rushed him out. Anita didn't scream. She covered her mouth with a silk handkerchief, hiding a smile. Within an hour of the collapse, the predators stopped pretending. Back at the estate, the CFO and Anita met in the study. They poured the finest whiskey Adam owned. To the end of an era, the CFO toasted, his voice loud and arrogant. The doctors say he won't last the night. I've already authorized the transfer of the shell company assets. By the time the board meets tomorrow morning, the majority share will be in our names. Anita leaned back in Adam's leather chair, a glass in her hand. He was so easy to break. He actually thought I was crying for him. He died thinking he was loved. That's the most pathetic part. They laughed, a cold, hollow sound that filled the room. They didn't see the tiny green light of the camera hidden in the eyes of a decorative bust. They didn't see Kendra sitting in a van 3 blocks away, recording every word, every admission of guilt, and every toast to their own downfall. They believed they had won. They believed the ghost was gone. They were wrong. Inside the private wing of the hospital, the machines hummed a steady artificial rhythm. To the nurses on the floor, the man in room 402 was a vegetable, a shell of an empire, waiting for the heart to stop. But as the door clicked shut and Kendra slipped inside, the dying man sat upright. He pulled the nasal cannula from his nose and the sensors from his chest. His movements were no longer sluggish. They were precise, fueled by a cold, concentrated adrenaline. "You're alive," Kendra whispered, her voice a mix of relief and lingering anger. "I've been taking the counteragents your contact provided for weeks," Adam said. He stood up, his legs steady. The gray film on his skin was gone, replaced by the hard, lethal look of a man who had returned from the dead. The collapse was a staged reaction. I needed them to believe the work was done. When a person thinks they've won, they stop whispering. They start shouting their crimes. He walked over to the laptop Kendra had opened. On the screen, the playback from the study showed Anita and the CFO laughing over their whiskey. It showed them discussing the dosage. It showed the CFO joking about how Sophie tripped. Adam's face didn't move, but his eyes turned into voids. They think tomorrow is a coronation. They think they're walking into a board meeting to divide my body. Are we going to the police now? Kendra asked, her hand trembling as she watched the footage of her mother's killers. No, Adam said, his voice a low, terrifying vibration. If we go to the police, they will get a trial. They get a chance to explain. I want them to experience the same thing they gave me. I want them to feel the walls closing in while they're still smiling. He looked at Kendra and for the first, he didn't look at her as an employee's daughter. He looked at her as his only ally. Sophie died to keep me in that house. Tomorrow I'm going back to finish it. Not for the money, for her. Kendra nodded, the weight of the moment settling between them. The false victory was over. The resurrection had begun. The boardroom on the 60th floor was a temple of glass and steel, overlooking a city that had no idea its king was about to return. Anita sat at the head of the table, dressed in a sharp ivory suit, the color of a new beginning. Beside her, the CFO gripped a leather briefcase containing the final asset transfers. The air was thick with the smell of expensive coffee and the quiet hum of victory. Given the tragic circumstances of my husband's health, Anita began, her voice a masterpiece of rehearsed sorrow. We are here to ensure the stability of this empire. The majority shares have been consolidated. We simply need the board's final. The heavy oak doors at the end of the room didn't open. They were slammed back with a force that rattled the glass walls. The room. Leth walked in. He wasn't leaning on a cane. He wasn't shaking. He moved with a terrifying predatory grace. His black suit tailored to perfection, his eyes fixed on Anita with the intensity of a laser. Behind him, Kendra Bagshaw walked with her chin high, clutching a tablet. Anita's face drained of color, turning a sickly translucent white. The CFO dropped his pen, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You're in the ICU, the CFO stammered, his voice cracking. I was, Adam said, his voice a low, gray vibration that filled every corner of the room. But then I realized I couldn't miss my own funeral. Before they could speak, the massive screens on the wall flickered to life. There was no corporate logo. Instead, the audio of the study played, clear, crisp, and damning. I increased the dosage. Anita's recorded voice rang out. I replaced the juice with slow toxins. Then the CFO's voice. Sophie was a pest. She tripped. The board members gasped, leaning away from Anita and the CFO as if they were suddenly radioactive. Security didn't move to help the new owners. They stood at the doors, their arms crossed, looking only at Adam. The police are in the lobby, Adam said, leaning over the table until he was inches from Anita's face. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He just looked at her with a terrifying clarity. You didn't marry a patient, Anita. You married a man who knows exactly how to bury his enemies. Anita tried to stand, but her legs gave out. She slumped into the chair she had tried to steal, a ghost of the woman she was 10 minutes ago. The CFO was already being let out in handcuffs. His arrogance was replaced by a panicked, silent sob. Adam watched them go, but he didn't feel the rush of victory. He felt the silence of a man who had won back a kingdom he no longer recognized. The estate was quiet again. The sirens were a distant memory, and the lawyers had finally stopped calling. Anita and the CFO were being held without bail, their lives reduced to evidence files and court dates. The ghost had his empire back, but as Adam walked the grounds, the weight of the silence was heavier than the crown. He stopped at the edge of the terrace, exactly where Sophie Bagshaw had first pressed her hand to his mouth. The purple foxgloves were in full bloom, their bells nodding in the evening breeze. They were beautiful, but they were no longer a weapon. They were just flowers. Kendra was there kneeling in the dirt. She wasn't wearing the sharp clothes she had worn to the boardroom. She was in her mother's old work vest, her hands deep in the soil. She didn't look up when Adam approached. She didn't have to. I'm setting up a permanent trust, Adam said, his voice level and grounded. The Sophie Bagshaw Foundation. It will fund the small businesses and families that were crushed during my expansion. It won't bring her back, but it will stop the cycle. Kendra stopped digging. She looked at her dirt-stained hands, then up at him. You think money makes it right? No, Adam said honestly. I know it doesn't, but for the first time in my life, I'm not using money to buy a result. I'm using it to admit I was wrong. He sat on the stone bench, the same one where he had performed his weakness for weeks. He looked at Kendra, the woman who had seen him at his absolute lowest and hadn't flinched. There was no romantic music, no dramatic confession. There was just an earned, weary respect. I thought power meant having the most people under your thumb, Adam murmured, looking out over the garden. It doesn't. It just means knowing who stays when the lights go out. Kendra stood up, wiping her hands on a cloth. She walked over and stood beside him, not behind him like a servant, and not beneath him like a subordinate. She stood as an equal. My mother saved you because she believed there was something in you worth saving. Kendra said, don't make her a liar. Adam looked at the house, then back at the garden. The betrayal was over. The illness was gone. The fake king had died in that boardroom, and a real man had taken his place. He didn't need a wedding or a victory parade. He just needed the stability of the earth beneath his feet and the honesty of the woman standing next to him. The ghost of soul was gone. Adam was finally home. When a king falls, only the loyal remain. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe to join our circle for more tile eyes of quiet justice. Please subscribe and tell us in the comments the city or country you're watching from.